mad, stupid, or evil? Does it matter which best fits the description of our ruling classes? The consequence will be the same. What does it matter if World War III is started for reasons of our ruling classes being insane or stupid or evil? It's still World War III. What we can agree with is that World War III would be disastrous, unnecessary, wrong. But how can we prevent it if this is what you think is going to happen? And if you don't think it's going to happen, why don't you? Were the First and Second World Wars fought for good reasons? I don't think you can confidently say that, can you? What was World War I about? If World War II was a continuation of World War I, then we ought to know what World War I is about. Perhaps it's like a brawl in a pub. There you are, having a drink, and suddenly violence breaks out. Maybe you will never find out what it was about. Perhaps you couldn't be bothered. You just got the hell out of there if you could. Or if you didn't, you might get hurt with, well, pieces of flying furniture and flying glass. But the fact is, I think we already know that World War I and World War II were not fought for reasons that you can immediately put your finger on and say, oh, that was absolutely right. It wasn't because Germany declared war on Britain on both occasions, World War I, World War II, Britain declared war on Germany. Can the British explain what it was all about? Did they really do it to save the Jews? There were no, well, Jews weren't on the agenda in World War I. World War I was about, not to put too fine a point on it, imperial rivalry. Germany didn't see why. It shouldn't have its place in the sun, and Britain had lots of places that were in the sun, but Britain wasn't going to let Germany just find a few places in the sun. And it wasn't really even looking for places in the sun, it just wanted to expand eastwards towards Russia, which it thought had plenty of land. But anyway, it wasn't really about Jews. The Second World War was not about Jews, it was really a continuation of World War I. It only became about Jews when, well, in the aftermath. I think Britain, more than Jews themselves, are more invested in the idea of the Holocaust than Jews themselves. Jews got to Israel because of the Holocaust. Britain had to pretend fighting World War One and World War Two. Britain had to pretend that fighting World War Two was about saving Jews from extermination and genocide, to make their sacrifice worthwhile. So the official narrative is that to save Jews from Germans, Britain sacrificed its world empire. And that is basically the post-war narrative. And of course, a lot of Britons who don't quite like Jews, wouldn't exactly approve of sacrificing their global empire to save the Jews, who are now protected by the Equality Act, protected and given a higher status than indigenous, white, Gentile, Christian Britons. And this increases their hatred of them and causes them to say things that would be interpreted as anti-Semitism, for which they would be punished, increasing their hatred of Jews, and so on and so forth. The reason for this post-war narrative is really a way of protecting the ruling classes who waged a ruinous imperial war that resulted in the loss of the British Empire. This led to a number of perhaps unintended policies. If Britain could be seen as a man who had lost everything, then he would be a man who decided to lose himself and his sorrows. Lose himself in his sorrows to wine, women and song, and this would be the swinging 60s and the sex revolution and the welfare state and the general liberalisation of everything. And I think this is really to distract the Britain from questioning their ruling classes, their political system, and when you tell so many lies, you forget which ones you've told, and you may easily expose your tower of lies by relying on the wrong lie or saying the wrong thing. But there it is. We have a ruling class that has a particular narrative to spin that its people are expected to accept, and which they are terrified of having exposed. It doesn't fit in with the narrative of Jews being cunning, if Jews are the fall guys. Sometimes you're given things and you eagerly accept them, not knowing that there is a price to accepting a certain status, a certain gift, a certain protection. And it means that you will be blamed, you will be looked on as collaborators and conspirators to keep the people who complain about you down. I don't think Jews are really that cunning, or perhaps they were once upon a time, but I think most people don't seem to get the most basic ideas about life and reality. Why do people envy Jews? I think it's because the grass always seems to be greener on the other side. Rich people seem, well, a cut above us. They're better dressed, they have better hair, they have better teeth, they have nicer holidays. They seem, from a distance, to lead a charmed life. I forget now who said that ordinary people, normal people are just people you don't know very well. Because once you do get to know people, you realise that they have neuroses and contradictions and do things that they cannot quite explain. Either to themselves or to other people, and they don't want you asking too many questions because it makes them uncomfortable. They don't know. They can't explain themselves. And it seems to be the case that a lot of people cannot really explain themselves in the depths of their neurosis. The British cannot explain themselves, and Jews can't really explain themselves properly either. And there are things that they deny, that they don't like talking about, and can't explain properly either to others or themselves. Why are Jews so important? They are important because they're supposed to be chosen by the most powerful being conceivable, belief in whom will give you the theory of everything, which is in fact unfalsifiable. So it is this idea that good will be rewarded, evil punished in this life or the afterlife, and that there exists a perfectly moral God who knows everything and can do anything, who is eternal, supreme, and perfectly moral. The perfectly moral part is really the most important of all, because this is the part that most people cannot accept or believe. Now, my conversations with someone who doesn't like Jews is that because he hates Jews, he must also hate the God that made them his chosen people. And this means, well, what does this mean? I think he's pushed himself into a corner, because if the God of Israel, who made Jews his chosen people, is the only God worthy of worship, then we're completely, anti-Semites are completely outgunned. What they are backed into doing is to show the hatred for Jews is to blame Jews for everything, but ironically, blaming Jews for everything only serves to elevate their status to something just below God. So if you hate, if you're atheist and you blame Jews for everything, then you are in fact making them divine by making them responsible for every evil. But instead of thinking again or ceasing and desisting, the anti-Semite doubles down on his hatred, thereby increasing, raising the status of the Jew whom he hates even further above him. Because if you really do hold them responsible for all the evil in the world, then you have made them just below God. And this is the this is so clever, really. It's only when you think of this inescapability of this apparently divine control over all these ideas, because it cannot be denied even by atheists that the logic of anti-Semites hating Jews and blaming them for everything means that Jews will be raised ever higher in status the more they blame them. And this is the case whether God exists or not. It is just this logic of hating Jews and blaming them for everything. And I think this probably drives the Gentile mad. And this may even suggest that the divine being does in fact exist by playing this trick on these anti-Semites who are backed into a corner, reduced almost to a kind of impotent rage because they can no longer do their thing without further punishing themselves. So what about Islamophobia? Islamophobia is also rebellion against God, I would suggest, because Muslims are the other people that God is supposed to favour. They are these Jews and they are these Gentiles, and the good ones will be following the rules properly, and the bad ones will be punished for not following the rules properly. And what is this to do with being mad, stupid or evil? I was going to relate it to the idea that error, whether for reasons of madness, stupidity or evil, doesn't really matter because the consequence is the same. If we fall off a tall building for mad reasons or evil reasons or stupid reasons, if we stupidly fall off because we weren't looking properly and we fall on the pavement with a splat and we die, the consequence is still the same, whether we were pushed off it by an evil person or thought we could fly because we were mad and then found we couldn't when we hit the pavement. So the consequence is the same. And the argument for obeying the rules is, I think, unanswerable now. So we know many people are complaining about their government that appears to be mad and unable to even do the obviously correct thing. Many people in the West do not agree with the war in the Ukraine. They don't trust their politicians. Their politicians don't seem to know that by causing prices to go up after lockdown, they are really trying the patience of their citizens. And when their patience runs out, it will result in revolution and the removal of the corrupt and incompetent political classes, and that will be the end of them. But we know they don't seem to care or see the danger, and this again increases our anxiety, because if our ruling classes don't even know what is good for themselves, then all the more would they be ignorant of what is good for the country and the people. And so, should I be heartened or disheartened? There are two ways of looking at it. I should be heartened that it is always darkest before dawn. If things get worse, then people will be more likely to find secular Quranism as my solution of an integrated moral and legal political system more acceptable, more attractive. So for that reason, I suppose I have to be pleased that things are getting worse and our politicians are making terrible mistake after terrible mistake. Or I could be dismayed and then leave it at that. So everything is really a matter of interpretation. I choose to look on the bright side because I must logically and necessarily look on the bright side, because all political activists are by definition optimists, because if you weren't an optimist you wouldn't even try. You would assume that everything will go wrong and the worst people will be in charge and do their worst to ruin things for so many people. I think it becomes increasingly clear what it is we ought to do. It's almost as if what we have now is really comeuppance for people thinking they know better than the rules of God and the laws of God in the Quran. It seems that God is saying, if you don't like my rules, let's see how you like the rules of your corrupt and incompetent politicians. Enjoy. This is my interpretation of things, and I don't see that it is obviously wrong. And in terms of what we should and shouldn't do, we already have very clear guidelines that we could just adopt without further ado. But it seems that I will have to fight so many people every inch of the way, because they will do anything to pretend not to understand what I'm saying. Question every word I say and but be generally obstructive, while they talk their nonsense and ask themselves and others silly questions. So, to finish, it doesn't matter if our ruling classes are mad or stupid or evil, as long as we know that what they're doing is wrong. Every error cries out for a correction. The correction is available, it's to hand. It only requires the solution to be discussed and proposed. But why is no one proposing it? Is it because they are fearful, or because they are in denial, or because they genuinely don't know about it, or are just trying to ignore it? I think people are just trying to ignore it. But soon it will become unignorable. And let's hope more and more people acknowledge its unignorability. Thank you for your attention.